Hi, we will get started in okay, now.
Welcome to the writer's class.
And Winona didn't even count it in because, of course, why would she do something like that to like help me out to know that I don't sound super crazy as I'm talking?
Because that's who I am. And
I'm Jade.
Oh, I'm Winona. Woo!
High five.
Social distance stuff. I'm so afraid of COVID.
Right.
So that's why it's still social distance stuff. And you know, we did that, and I was like, squirt. Like, wear it. There we go.
Anyway,
I got my vibe.
We wrote literary life guides with pop poetry.
Well done. Yes.
I did a segue, kind of, maybe. I don't know. And we wrote, and I thought divorce was bad with other life lessons. And I thought being grown up was easy if only I were me, a memoir in verse. Widow's Web series and the Foreign Coffee. We can get all those where you like to get our audiobooks, or you can find out the rest about all your 17 books
at www.andithoughtLadies.com. The way you just did that, I was gonna come back and be like, hey, W. And then I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. No,
it's way too much
energy. Feels like but
y'all aren't here to hear about us. You're here to hear from our wonderful guests.
Wonderful guests. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us 3 things about yourself.
Sure. I'm Susan Coll. I'm a writer. I've recently published a novel called Bookish People right here. What else about me? I teach writing. I have worked and now work again in an independent bookstore. I've got 2 dogs that will possibly wander through the Zoom and disrupt things, and lots of family, and I can think of more things as we go, but those are the highlights about me.
You said you teach writing, which immediately makes me go, what are your pet peeves about when you see writing come into you? None of my business, but I want to.
No, that's a good question. I mean, right now I teach a year-long class called the Novel Year, and it's a small group. It was 10 students. Now we have 8 students because it's just so much reading for everybody. So we workshop those novels over the course of a year. And I don't have any pet peeves in the writing. I love working with everyone, and they apply for the class, so they're usually writing at a pretty serious level. My only pet peeve is when I ask people what they're reading and they say they don't read, or they don't want to read, or they don't want to read any contemporary fiction because they think it'll kind of get in the way of their process, which I respect, but I also think that the best way to learn how to write is to read. And I think it's important to know what books are out there and to know what authors are doing right now if you are trying to get yourself published. So that's my pet peeve.
It's kind of funny because anywhere else you'd be like, I need to learn how to do the job well. So I need to, watch how everybody that I can find does it.
Yeah.
And right. Like, I'm going to write. I don't want to read.
Right. Exactly.
So I do a question about the book. Why a DC bookstore? Why not a New York bookstore or an LA bookstore?
Yeah, that's an easy question. Thank you. Because I live in DC and I worked at, I like 10, 11 years ago, started working at an independent bookstore in Washington, DC. And I promised the owners I wasn't going to write a novel set in a bookstore because I really had no intention of doing that. I was just there because I loved the store and I wanted a job and just loved being there. And it was only after I left and was reflecting on the job, and I was still somewhat accidentally still on the email distribution list, and somehow reading about the store, no longer being in the daily grind, certain things seemed funny to me. And I primarily write comic fiction. And what really inspired this book was the fact that in the reports at the end of each day, the vacuum cleaner was frequently broken, and it was broken so often that it just started to seem really funny to me. So this is a book inspired by a broken vacuum cleaner, which plays a big role in the novel.
This is so great. How do you write comedic fiction? Because fiction, there's a lot of stories that are funny, but they're not comedic fiction. They're just funny. Still, like they're a story with an element of humor. So how do you intentionally go to write that kind of story?
Yeah, that's another great question, because I don't really know the answer. When I started off writing many years ago, I didn't think I was writing comedy. I thought I was writing tragedy. I was literally working on a novel about somebody who had committed suicide. I was writing about Karl Marx and had learned that his daughter had committed suicide. And I thought that was just a fascinating slice of history. So I thought I was writing a historical novel about this tragic figure. And everyone who looked at it said, this is really funny. It's like, no, it wasn't supposed to be. They didn't think that aspect was funny, but the other thread of the story that I had. And for a long time, I kind of shied away from that because I would rather be writing like gorgeous literary fiction. And but it never works for me when I attempt that. My voice, I think my more natural voice is comic. And to what you just said too, it's not often comic situations. Sometimes it's really dark situations, but that I start to I process through comedy. So
I was going to ask how your book has such a literary soul, but then you just kind of answered it. So I'm going to sound real foolish when I say, how does your book have such a literary soul?
Yeah, I think
think of another question right now.
Yeah, I think just again, working in a bookstore, and that's kind of my life. I am a bookish person myself. I guess I love to read. I've always loved to read. And then working in a bookstore, you're just surrounded by people who love to read, both the other employees and the customers. And it's kind of a nice little bubble of a world to hide in, although you can't really hide too much these days because everything's controversial, right? Like, banned books and controversial books and authors who get themselves in trouble. I have some of that in the novel too. So it's not really the lovely little, quiet corner of the world that it might otherwise be. But it's also funny in the sense, there's a whole genre of academic novels out there set on college campuses. And I think they're sort of from the same origin, in the sense that you have a lot of very smart, bookish people in a small environment, and it's kind of like a pressure cooker environment, and it starts to be comic if you look at it a certain way.
I love the fact that you said it could be comic. Jade has a question and she barely ever does. So
I know, I have another question. So you have a book that was made into a TV movie. How did you write that script? And if so, how did you gut your baby?
I did not write that script. I was advised by everybody at the time to not try to write the script. And I think they were right about that. I don't know how to do that. I think I could learn. I certainly know how to think about writing it, but it was better to let someone come to it with a completely fresh eye. And the screenwriter took a piece of the novel. They took one character and told the story through her point of view and kind of turned the book inside out, which lent itself well to the screen. That never would have occurred to me. I think I was too close to the material. I would have tried to very literally adapt it. So I think it was good that I was not involved. I was a consultant, but I just was involved in a very technical kind of way on that. So.
Can you tell us a bit about what that process was like for you? I mean, not the script, the actual optioning part.
Yeah, wait, not the script, but the sale of it, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. It was the rare thing that came together easily, because from what I hear and what I'm sure you all hear is a lot of books get optioned and then they never get made into movies or TV. They just get, someone pays you to hang on to the rights and nothing happens. And I have friends who've gotten even pretty far along where they've identified the talent and seems like it's going to happen, and it still doesn't happen because there's so many steps to getting the funding. But this they wanted to make it. They sold it quickly, and my agent said, do this because they're really going to go ahead and make it. And they did. So I think some of it was just serendipity, good timing and luck. And
my next question, because I am the narcissist, is going to be, can you give me some of that luck?
I love the sensitivity.
well, I'd like some of that luck again. That was a while ago. It was a long time ago.
So what, as a writer, nope, I'm going to go back to my question I was going to ask before I asked the question about optioning, which was going to be, you live in two different worlds, which is kind of funny because you live in the book world in the bookstore, which is the end product, and then you live in the writing world, which is a bunch of people who are starting the product that you sell. What's the difference? And do they both feed each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. My first answer may not be completely responsive, but one thing I've found working in a bookstore and being a writer that has been counterintuitively, psychologically helpful is I just see the sheer volume of books that come into a bookstore, never mind the ones on the bookshelf that customers see, but the ones in the back room, the galley room where we have a staff break room and there's just walls and walls of galleys, advanced copies of books. And a lot of those are never even going to make it onto the bookstore shelf. So you really see the sausage factory piece of publishing. And I look at those books and I have a character in the book who does this. She just goes and stares at those books and doesn't want to see them. Eventually either people take them or we just have to give them away because new books come in. And you think somebody wrote all of those books and somebody got a book deal for all of those books. It's not just manuscripts there. They were sold, they were proofread, copyread, covers on them. And there's just so many books. It makes me more appreciative of how hard it is, not just to publish, but to even get your book out there on a shelf in a bookstore. But it also takes the pressure off in a strange way as a writer, because you think, oh, this is my book. I've spent 10 years working on it, and the stakes seem so high. And in a way, to just see it's a product, right? We could be in a tennis shoe store, and this could just be the new brand of Nikes that is selling well or it's not selling well. Now the season's over, we're shipping the Nikes back. So it's inventory. Everything's inventory. So that makes it feel less personal. So I think that perspective might help me somewhat as a writing instructor. And, I love working with students. I love being reminded of and reminding people that it's a craft. It's a business, but it's also just a craft, and we're all doing this because we love books and we love writing, and we kind of are somewhat crazy people to be doing this in the first place. So you better be doing it because you love it. So
yeah, I read this saying once where they were like, what writing is like getting your hardest homework every night, coming home to it, and then having someone tell you, well, you could do that just a little better right there. And then you start over again with your hardest homework.
Yeah.
And then like what you were saying, then you recognize it's just a product. It's so fun.
Yeah.
But you have to love it. If you don't love it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Are you both writers?
Yes.
Yeah.
We write anthology, but we like to call them literary life guides with pop poetry. Literary life guides with pop poetry. But technically they would be called anthologies.
Oh God.
But we don't subscribe to that.
That sounds great.
Because when you hear the word anthology, that's exactly what happens.
What?
You don't even get to the OG. You just anthology. Oh, I'm sorry.
What?
Well, I don't feel that way, but a friend of mine did just mention she's trying to shop an anthology, and it's been hard. So
she should say she's shopping a literary life guide.
Right, exactly. Well, when I first started trying to get published a long time ago, I described my work as satire, and everyone said, don't call it satire. Nobody likes that word. So there are these buzzwords, I guess, that we need
As
to
soon as
work
you say I write an anthology, people are just like, oh. It's like, I write literary and life guides with pop culture. Oh, what's that? See, same thing, just completely different wording. It's all in the marketing table. It's all in the marketing.
That's hilarious.
We were fortunate when we at one of our first interviews, someone told us you're not selling the book, you're selling the marketing of the book.
And they were like, oh, they were like saying, when you say you got a group of women together to write a book, everyone goes, oh, an anthology, I don't want it. So
they also say the same thing, like it's publishers when they hear, so what do you write? You like poetry? They're like, oh yeah, that's it. That's the end of the conversation anyway. Let's get back to you.
Yes. So you've written other books. Can you tell us what their titles are and where we can find these books?
Yes. I have written, this is my 6th book. My first book was the one I talked about that everyone thought was funny, even though it was supposed to be a tragedy, karlmarx.com. That one's a little harder to find right now because there's no ebook, but I think you can still find a paperback of that online. Then Rockville Pike, which is set, if anyone's from the DC area, a big commercial strip of retail, set set at the graveyard where F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda are buried, across the street from which is a gigantic furniture store. So that just seemed pretty literary landscape to me. Then I wrote a book called Acceptance. That's the one that was made into the TV movie with Joan Cusack. That's a comedy about college admissions and kind of craziness, parental craziness more than anything. Beach Week, which was a kind of companion to that in a way, more suburban high school students and their parents being oblivious and behaving badly and with privilege and craziness. And then The Stager, which was kind of a novel about a dysfunctional family, again in suburbs of Maryland, about a woman who is a home stager who comes into a home to kind of prepare it for sale. And I kind of like the literary kind of concept of trying to make a house look not like the people who live in it, to look like a blank slate so people can imagine themselves in there. That seemed full of possibility. And also just the idea of a stranger coming into your house. And I thought, what if this stranger isn't really a stranger? That was my premise. So someone's in the house mucking around, in a very intimate space, but actually knows something about the owner of the house that she shouldn't know. So, and then this book, and they're all available. You can find them all. I work in an independent bookstore, so I hesitate to say they're all available on Amazon, but you can find them all on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or online. So they're all there in one form or another.
You're apparently an excellent literary citizen. Can you tell us a bit about the work that you do that's close to writing, I guess you could say, writing?
Yeah, thank you.
That word dropped out of my head, so you know what I'm saying.
Well, thank you for saying that. In addition to now working again at this independent bookstore, which I had not planned to do, but they asked me to come help kind of think about how to transition post-COVID and virtual events back to in-person events. So I'm doing that. But the other thing I'm doing that you're probably referring to is I'm the president of the Faulkner Foundation. And that's a literary nonprofit. We do 3 different things. We give out the Faulkner Prize for Fiction. We have public literary programming. In fact, I just came straight from a meeting about that into this meeting about this year's season. And then we do work in DC Title I schools where we bring writers into schools, but we've also expanded that to have, more rigorous writing programs in schools. So, yeah.
See? Excellent
literary
citizen. Absolutely. And then, of course, I have to ask the question, that I ask everyone. Oh no, I lied. Question before this was going to be, how did you get your literary agent? Because everyone wants to know that.
Yeah, the first time out, I've been at this a long time, although the not being able to get published is still so fresh in my mind that it doesn't feel like a long time. It still feels surreal to me that I have a book out again, all over again, because it's always hard. The very first agent I found was when I was living in London, and it was really just the old-fashioned way of sending out query letter after query letter, getting rejection after rejection. But I did find an agent, and she wasn't able to sell the book. So I have a book that I never got published anywhere. And then when I moved to the US, by that point, I had more contacts. So my first literary agent was just somebody I knew, had that agent, and was able to connect me. And, once you're kind of in the business, it gets a little easier I recently switched agents, but again, I already knew. Now that I'm kind of in that world and working in that industry, I know the landscape of agents. So it's hard. And, if people are looking to just not give up, and there's so many agents out there, and it can be very discouraging, but you just have to keep sending it out there and using every contact you can, even if it's just for an intro, like I'm a friend of so-and-so's and I love, all the tricks they tell you, I think are true, if they're real. I love this book you just published, and I know this author who thought we'd be a good fit. The real trick in everything in publishing is just to get someone's attention. And one thing I do with my class, even though many of my students are not ready to try to find an agent, we practice writing query letters, and I bring an agent into my class to speak to the group, because I've watched a lot of really good writers with very strong novels send out lousy query letters, or they won't put the thing about them that's interesting up top. I have someone in my class who is trying to sell a novel and just showed me a query letter, and she is a TV producer. And I'm like, well, put that up top, because they're going to see that and they're going to go, then they're going to keep reading. If you just say my lovely novel about blah, blah, they're going to, it's like anthology. It's just, you need the words that will get them to keep reading, even if it feels slightly self-promotional, that you need to be able to put yourself out there. And that's hard. I still find that hard. So.
Well, now I feel like I don't even need to ask the question about the 3 tips that you would give to new writers. I feel like you gave us some really good tips, but 3 tips you give to new writers.
Yeah, no, I have a lot. I have a lot of tips, which is, I think it's very important to show your work to other people, but do it in the right way, with the right readers. You have some readers that you're going to give your work to for different purposes. I have one friend who I always know is not going to like my work, but I find that helpful to know why, because even with her different sensibility, I still find it helpful to hear her feedback, because she's such a good reader. You don't want to just give it to someone who's going to say, I love this, it's great, done, because that you're really looking for feedback. To have a thick skin and want that feedback and criticism, and to revise, just to keep revising. It's not done till it's done. Even with this book, I can't count how many revisions I did. And even once I sold it and had an editor and thought it was going into production, she sent me 9 single-spaced pages of notes for revision again. So it just, it's a lot of work, and to be willing to keep revising. I guess that's 2 tips. You wanted 3 tips.
Yeah. But the query letter one was a good tip.
Yeah. Well, I also think I'm not saying this because I'm trying to sell my class, which I'm not trying to do. It's ongoing. It's already, no spots left. But I do think finding a workshop, kind of professionally run workshop is very helpful. You know, I know MFA programs can be brutal, and I'm not necessarily saying you need to do that. I don't have an MFA myself, but you can replicate, you know, that's great if you can and want to do it, but also you can replicate that just with either a good writing group or a instructor-led writing group. And to, you know, the way we do it in my class, we have very formal rules of how you submit and formal rules about how you talk about a manuscript with the other students, so that you're not just saying things that will cause them to give up or, you know, just be embarrassed, or, you know, we have rules about how you talk about another manuscript. So
that's fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And one more time, tell us where we can find you and follow you and buy your books.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the book is, again, it's Bookish People. I'm on, I have a website, Susan Coll, Coll, there's my name, .com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and everything else I'm supposed to be on, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. That's Susan _ Keselenko, which is hard to spell, KESELENKO _Coll. But if you go to my website, you'll find links to all of that. So
well, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was really a lot of fun. You're great.
So much.
Like one of the most fun things I've done. So
oh, that's
you.
great. Yes. We've learned so much about independent bookstores, and now I know to maybe just go and ask if they have extra galley copies that they want to give her.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Now I know. Free book for me. I'm excited. So thank you so much for the information.
Thank you. We'll also ask publishers. They'll get them to you, especially knowing you have this show. They'll be happy to send them to you. So.
More free books. I'm super excited. Thank you for that suggestion too.
Thank you.
You can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.andithoughtladies.com. While you're there, go to the middle of the page to see the charities that we probably support. We support them also. We thank you in advance for that. But just remember, y'all, wisdom is all around you if
you're open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Winona
and Jade. Bye bye. Oh yeah, thanks for listening.